Hi there, it's Miss Tiffany from the Butler Area Public Library, and I'm here with another Library 101 video. Library 101 is a series of videos designed to help you learn more about the Butler Area Public Library, about library services in general, and about information literacy. Today we're going to focus on one of those information literacy topics, and I'm going to introduce the concept of digital citizenship. And that is the first vocabulary word that we are going to learn today. So what is digital citizenship? Well, let's break it down into two parts. The first word is digital. Digital simply means anything having to do with technology. So that could be smartphones and tablets, that could be desktops and laptops, but it could also be other forms of technology, things like video games, digital photography, basically any type of electronic media you are using, the word digital can refer to that. So the second half of that phrase is citizenship. Let's think a little bit about what citizenship is. To be a citizen in terms of government means that you are someone who resides in a particular location or belongs to a particular community. When we're talking about digital citizenship, the citizenship part of it doesn't have a specific place because digital is everywhere, right? So digital citizenship is interacting with other people through digital media, whether that's photographs, computers, apps, video games. It's the act of engaging with something digital and engaging with other people through that digital medium. So now I would like to talk about what it means to be a good digital citizen. What is good digital citizenship? Good digital citizens make sure that they are using digital media appropriately. What the word appropriately means for you depends on a couple of different things. First of all, your family may have very specific rules about what is and isn't appropriate in your household. It could be the type of video games that you are allowed to play. It could be the number of hours of screen time that you are allowed to have. It could be the minimum age you have to be in your family to have a cell phone. That part of digital citizenship is very, very personal. And those are things that as a family, you guys need to be thinking about and setting limits for. But there are other aspects of digital citizenship that are global. These can be things like the terms of service and agreements that you agree to when using online services. There are also basic rules of etiquette, things like not plagiarizing someone else's work online and calling it your own, adhering to copyright laws when you're using pictures or images on the internet. These are all examples of good digital citizenship. Privacy also highly factors into good digital citizenship. A good digital citizen follows some very basic rules of privacy. I would like to focus on a very specific concept within privacy and digital citizenship right now, and that is the concept of your username and password. So let's talk about the username first. Most of the time when you are creating an account, whether it is your Xbox Live account or a Nintendo Switch account, or it could be a social media account, you're going to have to provide some basic information in order to verify that you're an actual person and not some kind of a bot that's trying to use the service. And it also ensures that you have read those terms and conditions and agreed to the rules of that service as a digital citizen. When you are creating an account, one of the things that you will have to do is to create your username. So your username is something that's used to identify you, and it is individual to each person. Sometimes usernames are automatically assigned to you if it's not something that is important to that particular type of service or account. Most times you are able to personalize your username. And one of the things that you want to consider is what type of a resource are you using and what is an appropriate username for it. So for example, if you are doing online education, your school might require you to have a very specific username, like your first initial and your last name, or they may even assign one to you. But for other things that are more recreational in nature or more private or personal in nature, you often get to choose your own username. For things like that, which are publicly viewable, because your username is usually viewable by the public, you want to make sure that you're not giving out too much information about your personal identity. So first and last name might not be the best idea. Anything having to do with your actual legal name, in fact, might not be the best idea, including any kind of information about your school or your school mascot or the street that you live in. Those are personal and private details that you definitely don't want everyone on the internet to know, so you wouldn't want to use anything like that as your username. Instead, people will come up with a phrase that describes them. So, for example, Miss Tiffany has 2 dogs at home. So I might choose something like, I love 2 dogs as my username. That way, people seeing me on that service will be able to identify me specifically, but they won't know my actual real world details. So your username is something typically that when you're doing any type of digital work, the chances are other people are going to be able to see that username, and you always want to keep that in mind when you are creating it. The second part of creating an account on any type of digital service is typically picking a password. And your password is very different from your username. Your password is something that should be known only by you and a trusted adult in your life. And depending on what service you're using, that trusted adult might change. If it's a school account that you are creating, maybe a member of the school staff needs to have your password, but also your parent or your guardian or another responsible adult in your life should have access to knowing your password in case of emergency. But other than that, you don't want to give your password out to anyone on the internet, and you definitely don't want to make it something that other people can guess. Think of your account as a house. Your password is the key to get into your account house. And if you give someone else the key, they can go in there and steal things out of your house, right? It's the same thing with a digital account. If you create an account and then you have the password to keep it locked up tight, if someone else gets that password, they could go into your account and steal information from it. So, when we are creating a password for our account, there are a few different things that we want to keep in mind. Each account has its own requirements for what your password has to be. Often they will have characters involved. Now, when we hear the word character, typically at the library, we think of a character in a book. But when we're talking about passwords, the word character means something completely different. A character is something that takes up a space in the password. So character really means the number of things in your password. And those things can be different depending on what that particular account is. Sometimes those things can be numbers, sometimes those things can be letters, and sometimes those things can be symbols or special characters. So you might have a mixture of numbers, letters, exclamation points, underscores. All of those things can make up a password. The tricky part is every account wants something a little bit different for the password. Sometimes they want to make sure that you have at least one number, at least one letter, and at least one symbol. Sometimes they only care if you have numbers and letters. Sometimes they care specifically if the letters are uppercase or lowercase, and that means that your password is case sensitive. So for example, if you picked Butler123, which is not a good password, by the way, we'll talk about that in a minute, it might be important whether you use a capital B for Butler or lowercase b for Butler, and that is what case sensitive means. If something is case sensitive, then you have to copy it exactly. If it is uppercase when you create it, it has to be uppercase when you put it in. Not all passwords for all accounts are case sensitive, so you really have to pay attention when you are creating that account. So what makes a good password? Well, first of all, the longer it is, the better off you're going to be. You want to make sure that no one can guess your password. And if your password is only 3 letters long, it won't take someone all that much work to try to guess what those 3 letters are based on what they know about you, because it might be something like your initials, or it might be something like the first 3 letters of one of your names. Those are too easy. Those are too guessable. So the longer your password is, the better off you're going to be, because the harder it is for someone else to guess it. Typically, you want your password to be at least 8 characters long if that account permits it. Remember, we said characters are the number of things, numbers, letters, and symbols in your password. If the account has a case-sensitive password, remember that means you have to know which letters are uppercase and which letters are lowercase, then it is a good idea to mix uppercase and lowercase letters, because again, that makes it harder for someone else to guess that password. The same thing with adding numbers into your password. The more variety you put into your password, the less likely anyone will be able to figure that out. You also want to make sure that you're not including information in your password that might be easily guessable. Things like your street number, or your birth date, or your pet's name, or the street you live on, or your best friend's name, or your own name. So remember when I said Butler123 wasn't a very good password? Remember when I said Butler123 wasn't a very good password? That's because it contains something that's too easy to guess. First of all, it contains the word Butler. Well, I work at the Butler Area Public Library, so it's not too hard to associate the word Butler with me, or with you if you go to a Butler school. Secondly, 123 is a common string of numbers, right? That's the first 3 numbers of the numeric keys on the keyboard. So that doesn't give much variety to my password. You want your password to have as much variety as possible. So let's say you came up with a password. It has both uppercase letters and lowercase letters. It has some numbers thrown in there. It has some special characters thrown in there. But it's too hard for you to remember because it's just some meaningless combination of these characters, right? One of the ways that you can create a password that is still a strong password, but it is also something that you will remember, is to tie it to something that's already in your brain. So if you like purple unicorns, maybe your password is lowercase pu, capital R, lowercase pl3, for purple, and then unicorns spelled out the same way with an exclamation point at the end. So it's easy for you to remember your password looks like purple unicorns, but it's got some tricky things thrown in, like the numbers and the exclamation point and the mixture of uppercase and lowercase letters, right? This is also where that trusted adult comes into play. It's always a good idea for the trusted adult in your life to have the information that you use as your passwords just in case. It would be really terrible if you went to do your schoolwork one day and you couldn't remember the password for your account, right? But if you went to the trusted adult in your life and said, "Do you remember what my password is?" then hopefully they will be able to help you. If neither of you can remember it though, typically there is a way to recover your password and reset it. Which brings me to my next point. You've got the perfect password figured out, so you should be good to go, right? Your life is simple for the rest of your life because you've got the perfect password, right? Wrong. See, you never want to keep your password the same forever. You want to change your password regularly so that, again, you're keeping people from being able to access your information. You also want to make sure that you're not using the same password for every account. Even if you want to use the same kind of information, like let's say your first dog's name mixed with your favorite letter and a smiley face spelled out with a semicolon and a closed parentheses. That's fine. You can still use all of those, but you want to mix them up. You never want your password to be identical for accounts that you're using. You never want to use the same password for different accounts. This is why it's always a good idea when you are creating an account for any type of online service. Once again, that trusted adult is walking through the process with you. That way, they can go over the terms and conditions of using that service to ensure that you are being a good digital citizen and knowing what is and isn't appropriate. That way, they can help you create a username that does not contain too much personal information, and they can also help you create a password that is secure but also easy for you to remember. If you have created passwords and you're not sure if they're good enough, there's actually a place on the internet that you could go to check your password. It's called Passwordmeter.com. You can put in some information about your password and check it, and it's going to tell you if it's a strong password or a weak password. And if it's a weak password, you want to work a little bit harder to make it stronger. Maybe add some extra letters, numbers, and symbols to it. As you get older and you start to use more forms of digital media that require accounts, it's even more important that you are making strong passwords. You also want to make sure that you're not giving that password out to anyone. Even if your friend says, please just let me log into your account for 1 second. Definitely don't share your passwords with anyone. You can trust that responsible adult in your life, but for everyone else, it should be totally off limits. So in summary, in order to be a good digital citizen, you have to be using digital media responsibly. And one of the ways you do that is by creating accounts that have appropriate usernames and passwords. Remember, for your username, you don't want it to have too much personal information in it. For your password, you want to make sure that it is memorable but strong by containing at least 8 characters, a combination of letters, numbers, and symbols, a combination of uppercase and lowercase letters, and you want to make sure that that responsible adult in your life always knows your password, but no one else does. If you would like further information on digital citizenship or anything library related, please contact me at the library. I'm going to link a word search puzzle in the description of this video that uses some of the important words that we talked about today. And I'm also going to include my email address, so please reach out if you need anything. Thank you so much. Happy reading!